Well, a very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our 131st Security Thought Leadership webinar. I've been away for 2 weeks. Janice Goldster away, Mike Gibbs filled in while I was away. Thank you very much indeed to them. I'm going to let you into another secret. First of all, they did an excellent job and provide something very high standard to follow. But also, I've been to the dentist in the last few hours. I've got 6 stitches in my mouth. And so if I look lopsided, that's just the anesthetic. I haven't been hit while I've been away on holiday. But great to be back. Very much looking forward to this discussion. A very important one, actually. Today's topic is celebrating the role of the security officer. What next? And about 7 years ago, Jason Brown, one of the panelists today, rang me from Australia to tell me about this great idea that was getting currency in Australia, where the 24th of the 7th, 24th of July, was being earmarked as a special day to recognise security officers. The principle being that security, of course, work 24/7. Security officers need to be recognised. And what a great day to do it. And he's part of a project that's going in Australia to do that. And we thought, given this is our closest webinar to the 24th of the 7th, we would use today to ask about the role of the security officer and what we should be thinking should be happening next. And we've got 4 panelists, and they are from different parts of the world: Australia, United States, Canada, and Pakistan. And in a minute, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I will then invite them to make their opening statements. 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want to say about this topic. After that, I'll come to you, the audience, and invite you to ask questions. So please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and please get your questions in early. And I'll endeavour to incorporate them into the ensuing discussion. So without further ado, then, let's go and meet our panelists. And I've already mentioned Jason. So let's go to Australia first and meet Jason.
Well, thanks very much, Martin. My day job is National Security Director for Thales, and that keeps me pretty busy as an aerospace, space, aviation, etc. A lot of work to do, but I have a passionate interest in enhancing security worldwide through my work in international standards and supporting causes like Security Officers Day. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much indeed, Jason. So from Australia to Pakistan, Kaiser, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm ex-Army, ex-Special Forces, ex-military police, left the Army, set up this company, and for the last 21 years, I'm running this company in Pakistan. I'm happy to be in because it's something which I was all along in my life.
Kaiser, thank you very much indeed. Good to meet you and good to have you here. Let's go over to Canada then and meet Jody. Jody, please introduce yourself.
Good day, everyone. My name is Jody Reed. I'm the security manager with H&R REIT at the Bow Tower in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I started, as a security patroller, as a contract security patroller, 30 some years ago, and worked my way up, and now managing a large team. I'm also the current chair for our local ASIS chapter. I'm on the board of the Canadian Security Lifesaver Association and the board of the BOMA Public Safety Committee. Looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Jody, that makes you very well qualified as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And finally, over to Chris. Chris, please introduce yourself.
I'm Chris Hurtig. I'm a retired college professor. Before that, I was a nuclear security training administrator. And before that, I actually worked for a living. But I found it didn't agree with me, so I went into teaching. I've written and pestered quite a bit about the role of security officer. It's something we need to focus on if we're ever going to have any kind of homeland security or public safety.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. And we'll come back to all of you in a second. Now you know the process. We invite each of our panelists to spend just 3 minutes saying what they think about this topic. So without further ado, let's get their views. And don't forget, if you've got a question, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to incorporate it in the ensuing discussion. Get your question in early in order to count. Jason, let's come to you first, please. Jason, your opening statement, please.
Well, I'm going to say something really upfront about this. What do security officers provide? And I think food people understand they actually provide the freedom and safety for us to get on with our lives, whether it's in our workplace, in the street, on transport. Security officers are the ones who at the front of house sustain a safe and secure environment so we can live our lives. And people often just treat them as a piece of the furniture because it's only when there's a problem that they often get recognised. And sometimes they are often accused of being the source of the problem, whereas in fact it's the circumstances around them that have created the problem. The issue of the number of tasks and multi-skilling security officers have to address today is very, very complex. Legal systems, process issues, attitude, technology, all of those things have compounded the responsibilities and the requirement for capability of our frontline security personnel. COVID is just one more thing on top of that. Increased use of alcohol, increased use of drugs in nightclubs, aggression in the road place, all of these things have created complexities in the environment that the folk who give us our frontline support have to put up with. So there's a bunch of things that I might talk about as we go forward, issues around recognition, remuneration, training, etc. But for me, I've always been excited about getting engaged with our front of house personnel. I learnt that lesson when I was in the Defence Department, and if we have time, I'll tell you one of the anecdotes that inspired me to take the lead on as coordinator for International Security Officers Day, which is now in 8 countries.
Fantastic. And hopefully after that, it'll be even more, Jason. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go then to Pakistan and get Kaiser's view on this. Kaiser, security officers frontline. What do you got to say about that?
Our industry has not been very old. It's a recent induction because we were a tribal society and people wanted their own guards, personal guards coming from the villages and their own people. But say about the last 20 years, we've got into this system of guarding, and the American embassy was the biggest guard force keeper in Pakistan. It's now a very organized and systematic system that is in place. I personally feel that the security guard is the first man who faces the brunt of everything, whether it's the house, the guard outside your house, or a guard outside your office, or a close protection officer going with you in a transport, or somebody on the road. Like somebody pointed out that we have a lot of road rage these days. I personally feel that the olden concept of having a fellow with a weapon outside the gate is no longer there. The security guard has, or the security officer has to do a number of multitasking. He's got to be a nice man to talk to. He's going to be talking to the people coming into the offices. He's got to go on gate duties, checking personals and vehicles, premises patrols, no trespassing, at times surveillance and counter surveillance. So, and like you just pointed out, with the COVID coming in, it's now is also a medic in a certain sense, not just a guard. So my take on this is that it's a very important functionary and we need to upgrade him. We need to have him better than a postman or something, and he must be given credit for what all he's doing. That's my take on it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And of course, increasingly, there are many women involved in the security world as well. We should we should recognise that as well. Thank you very much indeed. We'll come back in a minute, I'm sure. Jody, interested in your thoughts on this topic. You're involved with the frontline. Jody, what your opening statement, please?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Really interesting comments there. Because I was going to talk a little bit about the history, I think, as well. And I think one thing we need to recognize is that we are still a very young industry. I mean, we take a look back to, bodyguards, we take a look at the night watchmen. But really, when we take a look at where the industry's progressed in the last 20, 30, maybe 50 years, we've grown leaps and bounds when we take a look at regulations across the world, training. But we're still in our infancy. Like, we need to recognize that. And I think as we look to progress, I mean, we've talked a lot about it. We've heard a lot about it in some of the past webinars around, continuing to standardize training at both the security officer level, but also at the management level. You know, and again, within the security industry, it's a very diverse industry. So trying to define that career path, and there is a lot of work being done there. You know, there's work being done by organizations. I know, you know, Dr. Glenn Kitteringham just, you know, recently talked about some career pathing documentation that he's put out. We take a look at some of the stuff, you know, internally within our industry, recognition. We talk about like the OSPAs. We talk about the organization that I'm involved with, the Canadian Security Lifesaver Association. But then we also need to talk about promotion outside the industry as well, and awareness, right, to the public. And I guess, to me, some of the barriers there that we see, I think it's time is one of them. You know, we just need to keep moving forward. I think it's kind of that continuing that next generation. Obviously, with a lot of this stuff, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be a strategy. You know, again, a lot of the groups in here are companies, so there's competitiveness, right? So we need to talk about an owner. You know, we need to talk about a voice of the industry, whether that's international, whether it's regional. I mean, we mentioned Jason mentioned the National Security Officer Day. And when Martin mentioned that to me, I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, we talk a lot about the Security Officer Week, the third week in September. But again, that was driven by a large contract security company in the United States. So as an industry, you know, are we all holding hands and marching in the same direction, or where are we going? And I guess, you know, my final thought on a lot of this is, you know, I've been involved with ASIS with our local board for over 10 years now. I've served as chair a couple times. So I always mention to my peers, and I ask them the question, you know, what are you doing to improve our industry? You know, and that's where I think we all need to put our heads together and come up with a game plan.
Jody, thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And as soon as we've heard from our fourth panelist, I'll come and to those questions and endeavour to involve it. So without further ado, then, let's meet our final panelist. Chris, your opening statement, please.
Security officers are they're on the front line, and they are the keystone of Homeland Security and public safety. We need to recognize that. We need to embrace that. We need to acknowledge that. And we need to do something about it. And I think the idea of our industry not talking to ourselves so much, but talking outside of our industry is very, very important. We don't do enough of that. We have a huge network. ASIS is the mother of all networks. It's incredible. But outside of our industry, people don't know who we are. We have standards and training. We have guidelines. We have the IFPO has a career center on their website, which is a great thing for developing a career path. A 17-year-old can look at it and read it in 10 or 15 minutes and understand what the security industry is, something which takes about 2 years normally. We have a lot of resources to bear, but we need to promote them. We really do. That's a big part of the problem.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And makes sense. I wonder whether I could come to each of you about this statement, though. Jody makes the point about moving forward. I got back from leave yesterday, my first day back this morning. I was up doing Keep Fit this morning, bright and early. And the major news item on UK radio was this, that there are people in isolation in hotels at the moment, and they're being looked after by security officers. And security officers have been harassing the women who are in isolation. Main news on the radio this morning. And of course, the trouble is, I'll come to you first, Jason, if I might. This sort of news travels quick and travels fast. And it may not be typical, but it's very serious in its consequences. Isn't it, Jason?
Look, absolutely. That sort of publicity doesn't reflect reality. It's cannon fodder for the masses in some ways. We had exactly the same situation in Australia where two security providers in one of our lockdown hotels got infected. Investigations showed there was performance issues, subcontracting, etc. But the deep part of the issue, they were 2 people out of 900. When investigated, they were subcontractors of a subcontractor, and they'd been given no training. And yet you would think that every security personnel who'd been deployed had been behaving inappropriately, which was not the case. And it took effectively a commission of investigation to come to that. But did the papers retract any of that? No. And the impact it had on people who are taking risks to provide that security cordon was very unfortunate. So it's very easy for journalists and others to find the crowd controller who's made a mistake. 60 crowd controllers at the cricket game, one person has had a bad night or whatever and does something wrong, they're all tarred with the same brush. And once investigated, you never see the results that show that it wasn't a security service provider fault. So
Thank you very much.
Mad about it.
Thanks very much, Jason. Okay, so I'll come to you the same point. I mean, I think in this case, it's clearly been happening, right? So male security guards have been sexually harassing some of the guests. And it's presented as, this is not being disputed. It's just the fact that it's been going on. How can we manage that, Kaiser? Because the trouble is, as Jason's just said, it doesn't go away quick, does it? It lasts.
I personally feel it's training. I'm a member of the ASIS for the last 10 years. I'm on the OSAC panel in Islamabad, and we keep talking of training. Unfortunately, what happens is there's a certain requirement. There's a flood, or there's an earthquake, or there's a big match coming up, and the people who get deployed there are not trained people. Training a guard, especially a total civilian, takes a lot of time and effort. In Pakistan, we prefer having ex-servicemen because, one, they're mostly better disciplined. Obviously, they have had 10 to 15 years of service. They know how to handle weapons. They know what authority is. So I personally feel that training is the essence of all this, not happening. Even today, I have an Italian gentleman who's been tested for covert in Karachi. We are looking after him. And I can tell you very confidently that these guys that I have, most of them are well trained, and they will never harass something. You've got to instill this thing that, one, the client is always right. That's business point of view. But then you have to be polite, and especially where females are concerned, you should be extra polite. Then I would also very strongly recommend, when you have females in isolation, you should have female security officers. I mean, in a backward, underdeveloped country like Pakistan, we have ladies working in the elite police, and we hire some of them, and from the forces, we have girls joining into the army. And I think the mix of these two would be helpful.
Thank you very much indeed. Jody, I know you were nodding as I was speaking, and I take on point some of what Jason and Kaiser have said, but Jody, is there a sense about the culture may not be right, because it is male dominated after all? Is there a sense here that we've got something to tackle that's more endemic?
I mean, I honestly believe, I think it's a lot of similarities between security and policing. I mean, when we see, excessive violence by police officers, and that hits the media pretty strong. And, and then if you pay attention to the stuff that's happening, behind the scenes or on our social medias, I mean, it's the other 99% of the police officers out there saying that's not the rest of us, and I think it's very similar in security. I mean, if you look at the number of security professionals, across the world, it's huge. So, one or two events, it's a numbers game. And I think that's where the importance comes from, putting money in the bank, as you say it. I mean, the promotion of the good stuff that security does do on a daily basis, the recognition. I mean, we talk about the Canadian Security Lifesaver Association, and some of the stories that I get to hear about the awesome work that security does, and that we're awarding them for it. The general public doesn't hear those stories a lot of the time. We hear about the horror stories. That's what the media loves to talk about. But this is where, as an industry, we need to talk about the proactive incidents that security has done that saved somebody's life, that has prevented an incident, and make sure you get that stuff out there for the public awareness prior to some of these, like I say, these one percenters that come out in a negative way. Okay,
interesting. I mean, I'm going to come to you, Chris. Building on Jody's point, I I mean, perhaps would you think that one of the problems for the security sector is it's been very poor at promoting itself in as Jody would say, get money in the bank? Chris?
Well, there really hasn't been any positive promotion. We've really left this thing go, and it's horrible what's going on. There are all kinds of things thwarted. There are all sorts of people being helped by security, and we have got to disseminate that. We've got to let people know. And I think professional security organizations need to step up to the plate and set up a mechanism for doing that. You can do that on social media very effectively, and it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. We've been out to lunch on this, and it's coming back to bite us.
Chris, what do you mean by professional security? What do you mean, Chris, by professional security groups?
ASIS.
Associations.
Yeah, BSIS, etc. The associations. I think they can play a role in this. Somebody's got to do this and start disseminating it.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much indeed for that. A similar point, Jason, come to you first from John Felix, who's very well known on the circuit in the UK here. He works for a security company. And he says, in my experience, Jason, the adage for security, first to get blamed and last to get praised, is sadly still prevalent today. And he talks about the recent COVID experience and the fact that when we return, the expectations of what's are going to be very high. But of course, the security role, he argues, has a lot of is increasingly about facility checks, and so it's marginal. The security bit is marginal. At the same time, the chances for errors increase. Security, therefore, he argues, is a second-tier service. This needs to change and change soon. Jason,
look, I think that's right? Very insightful. Yep, I think that's very insightful. The expectation is that security officers do everything that nobody else wants to do when it comes to front of house activities. And therefore, their role in ensuring the safety and security of the enterprise or the event often gets neglected by the attribution of extra tasks. And I think those who provide security services and those who hire for them need to be very explicit about what those roles are and not to dilute them, otherwise they won't get the security result. And I'd comment too on issues of training and recruitment. Some of the things I would have talked on earlier is where are our security officers coming from? In Australia, it's mostly our migrant population. So there's major issues of cultural and other process differences. But we have an advantage over some countries. We have mandatory training and mandatory licensing and national standards for security officers in each area of activity. And it's certified by government processes. And so that means we can maintain a standard. It doesn't help, however, when the complexity of the job goes beyond the training. And I think that's one of the issues. And lastly, I put a lot of effort on who are the people who are employing. One of the things, the comment about standing up, it's now 10 years since we had our Security Medals Award, and we went high for that, but it wasn't supported just by the security providers. It was Qantas, it was our biggest banks, it was our biggest transport, it was companies like Thales who went forward as people who procured security services to recognise the security officers. And we had, respectively, our Attorney General, Police Commissioner award those medals. And we got front page publicity for that sort of stuff. So I think the people who seek security service provision need to step up as well.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to come to you, Kazar, on this. And Kazar, very specifically, John Felix's question is about whether security is being perceived as a second tier service because the security role is being diluted. Is that the case was that the case in Pakistan, would you say, Kazar?
Yes, surely.
Okay.
I think one of the main reasons is that negative publicity out of 1,000 people, one man is a black sheep. That's played up with the social media and the television and everything. Unfortunately, the positivity, like somebody just pointed out that the medals were awarded and all, this should have been done 10 years back. The importance of, I was reading somewhere that out of 10, the security officer or the security guard comes at the 9th place. He's below waiters and he's below the postman and all. So I think one needs to enhance the image of the security officer. The positive things that they're doing must be shown so that they have a place in the society. And unless and until they have a proper place of what they're really doing, I mean, I am dealing in a place where we have millions of liters of oil, and there are people who are supporting them. But the owner, who's a billionaire, sleeps very nicely. But the poor guard who's doing it, they're not even paid very well. So government regulations must be strong, number one, must be implemented in letter and spirit, which is not happening, at least not in Pakistan. A lot of security companies would bid at a very low level. And when you're bidding at a low level, that means the money which is going to the security guard is much lesser than what he should be getting. So we need, yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Lee Kaiser. Jody, this discussion, you and I have been speaking recently, and I know you're part of an initiative in Canada to seek to address this very point about the role of the security officer and getting recognition for it. I wonder what you feel, Jody, about the point about how we go about proactively changing both the perception and the reality that security is a marginal task. Perhaps I'll come to you first, Jody, and then I'll come to you, Chris. So what we do rather than recognize the problem. Jody.
Sure. I think, again, it's some of that outside promotion. I mean, I believe we're moving in the right direction with, continuing to improve training, continuing to improve regulations. I think it's, getting that information out then to the younger generations, into the educational institutions, that this is a career path. It's not just a place to stop through. Not so many months ago, my son's 14 years old, and he expressed his interest to be a security manager to me. That, what are you going to be in life? I want to be a security manager. And I responded with a bit of horror. I don't do that. Why would you even say something like that? And then, of course, for days afterwards, I felt terrible for even thinking that. And I said, well, why would I be ashamed of my own industry? And so I thought about that a lot, and I think it's that, having the understanding the industry we're in, having respect for it, and continuing to promote it, and it's great. It is a great industry, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it, and we shouldn't be tripping over ourselves looking to improve.
Okay, Chris, let me come to you, and I wonder whether I could ask you, Chris, to focus specifically on a question we've got from Sandy Davis, because in terms of making this situation better, Sandy's asking about whether mandatory training is required to bring a yardstick to measure security officers' knowledge. In other words, if I could elaborate on Sandy's question, it's one thing to have mandatory training, it's quite another to understand what they know and how well they do things. Chris, is there a better way of getting to a position where those who are deployed we know to be better than, or is it just down to regulation and training, the two most common sort of mentioned features in this debate? Chris.
Everything has its place. Regulation is certainly important. Problem we have in America is that we have 50 states, and they all do their own thing. They all have their own regulations. The other thing is that a lot of times the regulations are very minimal, and sometimes they're not enforced. So there's problems with regulations, but regulation certainly has its place. I think the idea of, professional certifications like the CPO is very, very important. I think job titles are important. And one thing I would get to is, what do security officers do? Do we have a good job task analysis? Do we really understand what they do, and then match that up with our expectations, because Martin, we don't do that in many cases. If we
Why
really
not,
understand,
Chris? Why not? That's when you speak, it sort of sounds obvious, right? Why is that not done?
it's historic. We haven't done job task analysis for security officers. And the problem is the role of the security officer is very complex. It's very broad, and nobody recognizes that. And if you don't study it, if you don't have some data, it's hard to make that argument. And one of the problems we have is we hire people, we put them in this complex role, we don't pay them enough. We expect too much and they leave, they vote with their feet.
Yeah.
It's not a good situation.
No, it's not a good situation. And let me come to you, Jason, with this sort of follow up about that very point. I mean, I mean, there are many ways you could argue, or let me argue to you, the security sector hasn't helped itself. It's all very well lamenting these issues, but they are within the control of the security sector to change. And, reading words that all of you are saying is that it hasn't done enough, and it simply hasn't stood up to be counted when the going's got tough. Jason, fair enough or an overstatement?
No, look, I think as a general analysis, that's correct. And that's one of the reasons why I'm having this discussion now, and I've been involved with trying to develop these processes, commenting on the training. I think in some ways Australia is better off than other countries because our training has been analysed for competency. But of course, it's still not as good as it should be given the complexity of the task. But the other problem is because the pay is often so poor, to make a reasonable living, many security personnel have more than one job, or they go from one 8-hour shift somewhere to another 8-hour shift somewhere. And that's not policed effectively. And I blame the employers of security services. So I know as a member of my company that we try to get the best service for the amount we can pay. And in a competitive environment, the 3 or 4 companies who can meet my requirements will compete with each other. And part of that competition is pricing. But at least I'm in a company which puts the performance measures with greater weight than pricing. But I know there's plenty of companies that don't do that. So there's a bunch of issues. And I think not just the representational organisations for security personnel, but the employers of significant security have to step up. I think an important thing would be if they were held accountable for the security performance over and above the company that's providing it, because it goes back to the way they've employed them under the contract. So if I was to be looking at this from, say, critical infrastructure protection, and I was a major energy supplier, if I had a security personnel where they were underpaid, under-resourced, under-trained, the contract was done badly, the company's responsible, not the security provider, who's still responsible, but the actual accountability rests with the person making the purchase. They deliberately are buying a product not fit for the purpose. And I think that can be demonstrated if governments were willing to do that analysis.
Well, okay. Thanks, Jason. Let me come to Kaiser and ask Kaiser, because obviously you're in precisely this position. Kaiser, Jason's point then is we need to look to people who buy security services because they simply aren't, sometimes they simply don't get the job description right, they don't get the role right, and they don't pay for it. But you don't have to take the work, Kaiser. Surely it's not the employer, it's down to you. It's your fault if you take the work and you can't deliver. Kaiser, your thoughts?
Unfortunately, what happens is that this is a competitive nature of work, right? You're competing against other competitors to get hold of an employer or a client, like we call them the clients. Now, if you try and, I mean, I'll give you a personal example. I was working with Chemonics. It's a major organization in the US on a USAID funded project in Pakistan. Now, it was the employer who laid down that the minimum salary must be this, the guy must be insured, he must have regular leave. Unfortunately, most of the employees are not willing to do that. The company may, I mean, I had to really fight that there should be a fan in summers and a heater in winters. It's very cold and it's very hot in Pakistan. Now, this should be a very normal, standard thing which should happen. I think, unfortunately, the security guards, and when I hear what is happening in Australia and other countries, I think we're equally bad. I thought Australia and Canada should be much, much better. But I personally feel that the security guard is underpaid, the security guard is overworked, and he does not get his due share of respect, what he should. That's my take on that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So let me come to you then, Jody, because Keith Nielsen's got a related question to this. It's about guarding companies always facing the reality that someone will offer a lower price and compromise service. I think it's a worldwide, as far as I can tell, a worldwide issue. And he asked the question, how do we stop it? And bad publicity sticks as a consequence. Who should be promoting the standards and enforcing it? I wonder whether I could get your focus on Keith's point about how do we stop this scenario where companies are offering contracts that inevitably require people to work in less optimal conditions. This is Jason and Kaiser's point. What's the remedy? And I'll come to you straight afterward, Chris. Jody.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and I know we talked about it in some of the past webinars as well, but I do think there's some consideration that should be given in our industry. Maybe if it's government regulated, if it's industry regulated, around levels. Similar to like trades deal with, like an electrician. I mean, they don't start at minimum wage and go up. If you're level 1, level 2, or level 3 electrician, you start at this level. And I think in security, it's something we consider. I mean, when I take a look at it from my perspective in the property management industry, security is often paid 10, 20, even up to 30% less than the operations, staff. Should they be? Is security 30% less important than operations? So, again, they go through different schooling levels than security do. So, do we consider as an industry, where that's driven from? I don't know, but it's a topic for consideration around trade levels.
Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting. Chris, your thoughts on this? Because this is part of the problem, isn't it? That companies accept work that they know in reality is going to mean that the work that's delivered is less than optimal. How do we change it, Chris?
Well, the problem obviously is with the client. The client wants to think they're smarter than they really are. They want to believe that they're getting this great deal, and they're not. You get what you pay for. They force the contractor to lie. They send out these requests for proposals that are absurd. You can't possibly fulfill all the things that are in those things. And that's a problem. I think government regulation, perhaps indirectly, can clean this up. We could have regulation where, say, the chemical industry or any other part of critical infrastructure, you would be responsible for having a certain level of training and screening, etc., for your security force, no matter who provides it, whether it's proprietary or contractual, doesn't matter. You are responsible for that. And I think that could be done. And I think that the industries would kind of accept that. I think they'd go along with that.
And Chris, but you see, the thing is, they don't have to accept the work. So you're putting the blame on the client, but they can get away with it. And if they can get away with it, isn't it inevitable that therefore they will?
Sure. If human beings take the path of least resistance, and we do what we can, what we think we can get away with. That's the way we operate. That's human nature. Okay.
Thank you. Kaiser, can I just ask you a quick question? A quick question about, you've spoken about male officers quite a bit. Just in Pakistan, female security officers, it was a problem. The way that this issue is being dealt with in Britain is they're calling for more female security officers to change the culture and to be involved in dealing with women. which sounds to me quite a good step. But the response came back, we can't get enough women security officers, female security officers. What's the situation in Pakistan and with your company? Very quickly, Kaiser, because I'm running out of time.
Yeah, we have security ladies, females in the security industry, although the numbers is much less and the number must increase much higher than what we have at present. But international NGOs, international companies coming in, so we have female security officers in it. Normally, most of these ladies have come up because we have the ladies in the elite force, and very recently, the last couple of years, we have ladies in the army, in the forces. So we have fighter pilot ladies. So that's a big incentive for girls to come into this. The important thing is that we have to be a little careful where they're deployed, especially in our culture. So we do have ladies. They need to be more trained. They need to be a little more aggressive. Culturally speaking, in Pakistan, ladies are a little subdued, which I think needs changing. But we have some fantastic officers. Recently, one of our lady officers got hold of a dacoit, although she was not on duty there, but she was passing by and from a bank in Karachi. So I feel with more induction, more training, ladies would be as good or as bad as any other people.
I mean, it's interesting actually to hear you speak, Kaiser, because in this country, there's a lot of emphasis on recruiting women precisely because they bring a different skill set, which could spread so less aggression and more talent, more negotiation. And okay, let's move on. It's a fantastic topic all in its own right. Got two final points, Jason. Very quickly, both Tracy Rogers and Mike Gibbs have looked at where the influence for change may come from. Mike's talking about the emphasis on police trainers, probably perhaps. Tracy's saying, can we look to army and police more generally for guidance on this? In terms of sea change in strategic level, I'm going to ask of you, you've all got 20 seconds to answer this complex question. Strategic level, where do we look to for strategic change on presenting a better image of security? Jason, 20 seconds, off we go.
I think there's two areas. One, those associations that represent the professional service providers need to put some focus on this and start the sort of lobbying and engagement that changes attitudes and behaviours. And that includes presenting and supporting security provision as a worthwhile profession and communicating that to young people and people of all backgrounds. Secondly, the relationship that government needs to establish in terms of setting certain criteria and standards and expectations of those who are providing services that require protection, having accountability for those, not just the service provider, but for those who are involved in the service. And they, as people seeking the service, should take a lead in supporting training, development and competence.
Thanks, Jason. Going to have to move on. Chris, very 20 seconds maximum. Strategic level, where do we change?
The government has to put in a lot of effort in it. And I personally feel the moment this becomes a profession, at this point of time, it's a second profession. I'm an ex-army officer, I'm an ex-marine, I'm an ex-this, I'm a Royal Mounted Police, I'm an ex-army officer. The moment it becomes a proper organization where the man at the age of 17 joining in knows that he can go up to the director level and make a lot of money, and a career that is important. I personally would look at that way.
Thank you very much. And of course, for women too, hopefully, Kaiser. Jody, strategic level, 20 seconds, please, Jody.
Oh, yes, of course.
Sure. Lots of great comments. I think I would add to that. I mean, we have a large number of participants today, and I know there'll be a lot of participants that watch after the fact. And if, again, thinking it from a grassroots level, if we can each pick up something to make the industry better, that's a lot of hands doing a lot of good.
Yeah, good point. We could all do something. Chris, final comment from you, 20 seconds, strategic level, where do we look for change?
I think we need to promote the International Security Officers Day. I think we need to promote the IFPO Career Center. And I think we need to reach out to educational institutions and people who do career counseling. And we also have to reach out to government entities. A lot of times we don't do that. We don't communicate with the government. We don't communicate with the people that are making the laws. We need to do much more of that.
Panel, thank you so much. So much we could have discussed. We got through a lot, I thought, actually, and thank you very, very much indeed for your comment. And we're going to return to this topic in the future. Fascinating insights, I thought, from around the world there. Thank you very much indeed to all of those who asked questions and took part in the chat, which seemed very active. Really appreciate it. Just to let you know, actually, there is a major research study going on at the moment, exploring the modern role and job complexity of security officers, funded by IFPOs, sponsored by those companies, and we're going to be reporting on that in late September. So please do look out for that report. Going to be a big one. We'll let you know more nearer the time. Just to say that OSPA's closing date in Germany, the 2nd of August, in Norway, the 16th of August. If you're in Germany or Norway, you've got to get your entries in quick. They're also open at the moment in Australia, Romania, and the United Kingdom. So get your entries in, please, as quick as you can. The Tackling Economic Crime Awards, the entries close on the 2nd of August. So in the UK, Tackling Economic Crime Awards, 2nd of August. Also the Cyber OSPAs, this global initiative. You've got to the 9th of August to enter the Cyber OSPAs. This is the first time it's been run. It's a global initiative. Look at all the associations involved. And if your association is not involved there, they probably don't know about it yet. Let them know. It's really, really important we get support for cybersecurity professionals around the world. And they're all the categories they can do, and more on the Cyber OSPAs website. And also to say that we'll be coming back and doing the same thing on Thursday of next week. So throughout the summer months, with every Thursday rather than Tuesday and Thursday. And the topic will be the CISO perspective on protecting the critical infrastructure against increasing cyber attacks. What have they got to say about all this? We've got 3 panelists, again, from different parts of the world who are going to be offering their insights. Thank you once again to my panel. Thank you once again to you, the audience, for asking your questions. In the background, I've got to say a big thanks to Christine Brooks and Hannah Miller, who've kept it all going. And once again, thanks to Mike Gibbs and Janice Goldstraw-White, who looked after the show while I was away. I very much hope you've enjoyed this. A copy of the webinar will be on the website tomorrow, plus a blog I'll be writing about what they've all been saying. Very much hope you'll join us again. I hope that will be next Thursday, same time. Until then, or whenever we meet, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.